A woman gives birth on board the spacecraft at the beginning of the episode. This is a monumental accomplishment, as it has never been accomplished in the history of humankind before. Everyone on board, including the staff, joins together for a party in the main hall later on. Iris and Karen proudly announce the birth of their son, a healthy boy, at 11 a.m. There is a constant beeping sound that Captain Clarke and Billie hear as they listen to the message. In their minds, this must be awful news, so they rush off to investigate. After several hours of looking about the spacecraft, the two still haven't found the cause of the noise. Then a man walks up to them pretending to be an expert in science and spacecraft. He goes on to say that they are low on oxygen and the noise is coming from the oxygen supply room. When the other passengers hear this, they are startled, and Clarke and Billie instantly hide their lips. After some time, they tell Karen and Iris the awful news, and the two are as surprised and afraid as everyone else. Meanwhile on Earth, Rav has a conversation with the President of the United States and manages to coax him into funding the rescue operation. But she also has to win over the other president before the expedition can get underway. After waiting for a time, she is finally allowed into a room, and when her turn comes, a mechanical figure addresses her from across the room. It guarantees her money, but only if 500 NEPs are relocated off of Avenue 5. As a result, Rav is in a very precarious position. Once everyone is back on Avenue 5, Judd calls a meeting to discuss the new oxygen issue. All of them, fearing for their lives, resolve to cut back on oxygen intake by not laughing, not exercising, not coughing, and not yelling. Further, from this point forward, everyone must use a very low voice. Shortly thereafter, Rav gives them a call to share the excellent news that they have been awarded funds from the government. They have been given the order to jettison 500 NEPs, she adds. But then she says she refused the offer outright. All those on board the ship missed her final words and only caught the bit about having to jettison 500 NEPs. This causes widespread fear among the crew, and some passengers may have even overheard it, but Captain Clarke calms them all by assuring them that they won't be fired, as long as he's in control. Meanwhile, the ever-mischievous has a plan B in mind to keep his customers amused. With lasers, he plans to illuminate the floating feces. After he finishes setting up, he goes on live to let everyone know they need to hurry since they're about to run out of air. So he sets the regulations and tells everyone on board to cut back on oxygen use as much as possible. Some of the fuming passengers later storm Captain Clarke's office, demanding explanations. During the confusion, they also hear that 500 NEPs would be kicked from the ship. The tensions rise to a boiling point, but suddenly Billie shows up with some good news. She explains that the beeping is not a sign of low oxygen levels. The arrival of the baby is to blame. The ship is suggesting they readjust the infant's position. After this announcement, everyone seems to take a deep breath of relief, but then they start turning back on the skipper for his cunning scheme to kick passengers off the ship. Judd fires his lasers, illuminating the entire space, preventing any more escalation. Everybody, even Captain Clarke, is now transfixed by the exquisiteness of the feces that orbits them. An intimidating man named Harrison bursts in later while everyone is marveling at the glowing excrement. Judd appears to be terrified by him, as he immediately turns around and flees upon seeing him. When Captain Clarke questions Iris about it, he learns that Harrison is a trillionaire who blames Judd for the failure of his space mission and thinks the whole thing hilarious. Now he plans to sue Judd Galaxies, which would likely lead to the company's demise. Judd and Harrison have been in a difficult scenario all day because they keep running into each other. Reports of the plan to relocate 500 NEPs in order to rescue the rest have spread to other parts of the world. They start blaming Rav for it, not realizing he actually gave the go-ahead. A small but vocal minority has even organized rallies in which death threats have been made against her. When Billie and Clarke return to Avenue 5, she invites them to her office. There was a purpose why Joe grabbed Clarke's handprints before they took off, she reveals. After an 8-week voyage, they needed to return to port. Clarke will have to study docking procedures for the spaceship after Joe's death so that they may return to Earth without incident in 3.5 years. Captain Clarke is stunned to hear this, but he must now begin the arduous process of learning it. Down the road, as Billie and her friend are in their bedroom, inspiration hits. She figures out that they can shorten the time it takes to reach Earth without throwing 500 people if they lower the weight of the comparable amount of people. The spaceship may be propelled simply by tossing the weight into the back trap. Clarke is ecstatic about it, so he shares it with everyone. All the other passengers, including especially Judd, are now optimistic. Overseas, the United States government is getting ready to send a spacecraft to Avenue 5 to provide food and medicine. After receiving many death threats, Rav reluctantly boards the spacecraft and makes his way to Avenue 5. Her objective is to return to the spacecraft with Judd in tow. However, the captain breaks the news that she will have to remain in Avenue 5 if Judd is allowed to reboard the aircraft to Earth. The following image shows the passengers obeying the captain's commands and starting to gather up their unnecessary belongings. Some people get rid of their wardrobes, some get rid of their guitars, and still others get rid of their bunnies as pets. Karen herself is in charge of making the final choice. Meanwhile, Billie and Captain Clarke are in the bridge studying how to dock the spaceship. He fails miserably at his initial tries since he is scientifically illiterate. By the looks of his current development, Billie and Cyrus are estimating that he will need more than 4 years to fully master the material. Following some time has passed, as Clarke ascends the stairs, he is questioned by Judd about his poor performance on the job. A verbal dispute ensues between the two after a series of unfortunate events. Clarke resigns before Judd can sack him since the CEO is obviously unhappy with the captain's performance. His terrible head is shown when he removes his wig. Everyone on board now knows that he is only a hired actor pretending to be the skipper. After he leaves, Judd makes an elderly man captain. Yet it becomes clear that this was a poor choice. The captain walks into the command center and finds out immediately that everyone working there is an actor. They all seem to be talking past one another about the spaceship, and they can't seem to learn anything new. He storms over to Judd and the other passengers, fuming with wrath, and spills the beans, creating even more mayhem. One passenger doubts that everything here is really real, while another claims that they are not even in space, but in a computer simulation. Passengers begin shouting "Let us out" after hearing this. They are now prepared to exit the ship and examine the situation for themselves. Clarke, now bald, tries to convince them that they are, in fact, in space. He also warns that they are doomed the second they leave the airlock, but no one seems to care. Harrison, the haughty trillionaire, joins the outraged crowd and wants to be released. Just then, Matt Spencer, head of customer relations, shows in and provides the key to the airlock. But he attempts to communicate with them in their own language. They are, he says, in a simulation, and everything they are experiencing is an illusion. They will perish in the simulation if they exit the airlock. However, they will also perish in the actual world. The passengers are appeased for the time being, but they soon begin complaining anew. They hastily enter the passcode Matt gave them in order to access the airlock's gate. Ignoring Clarke's attempts to keep him out, one of the passengers rushes in. Then, in a moment, he succumbs to the cold and dies. The native passengers, however, persist in their belief that it is only a VFX effect in the game. Thus, the 6 additional passengers enter the airlock and perish in the cold. Harrison, a trillionaire, is one of them. When the last passenger who had frozen within the airlock slams into the walls and tears her limbs off, the other passengers suddenly understand they are in space. Clarke reassumes his role as captain as a result of the tragedy, while Matt is upset and begins to blame himself for everything that went wrong. He resolves to spend the next 3.5 years in solitude. But before he leaves, he alters the airlock security code. There is currently no way for anyone to enter or exit the spaceship. Without the airlock, not even the unnecessary stuff may be thrown away. Clarke and the others are understandably terrified upon realizing this. Quickly forming into teams, they set out to locate him, with Clarke partnered up with his worst nemesis, Judd. It turns out, though, that while looking for Matt, the two of them form a strong relationship and work well together. Simultaneously, Rav makes it to the spaceship and is shocked to learn that 11 individuals on board have already perished. In the meantime, Clarke and Judd track down Matt. He has been eating chocolate for hours and is in a horrible state as a result. Before long, Rav shows there and smacks Judd for being a psychopath and endangering the mission. As the others join us, the tension builds and Matt relinquishes the airlock's code. As they continue to converse, they notice that Judd is missing. As it turns out, he's making his way to the rocket ship that Rov brought so that he may return to Earth. And then the others get there, too, but it's already too late for them. It seems like Judd has made it inside and is headed for home. But as soon as Rov and the others warn him that the people of Earth would murder him for the actions he has made here, he bolts. All of the hard work and sacrifices Captain Clarke has made have led to this point. He is no longer welcome to return home. Unfortunately, upon entering, he is reminded that only his fingerprint will work to dock the Avenue 5. Now he's back, too. The previous stand-up comic, Jordan, sees his chance and sneaks in, but Iris immediately comes after him and kicks him out. However, the doors lock before she can leave as well. Now she has to return to Earth and leave her employer, Judd, to his own devices. Karen discards all of the unnecessary items in the last scene. After she's finished, though, she says that the front entrance was much more convenient than the back. Captain Clarke and Billie are stunned to hear this, since they had expected the energy to be used for propulsion. They've purged a lot of things from the front and are now being forced rearward, altering the course of Avenue 5. Finally, as the story concludes, Cyrus goes forward and announces that they will need around 8 years to travel to Earth.